nerds, just Jamie here with
your friend Claude.
And this is Nerd Bomber vs. Movies, the show where two movies fight and we pick a winner. Today we are focusing on comedies, which we haven't done as much of on the show. Every once in a while they'll pop up, but usually it's genre stuff. So we're going with comedies, both from 1995, both starring SNL alums in pretty much their first starring roles.
Basically.
They are Billy Madison, starring Adam Sandler, and Tommy Boy, starring Chris Farley and David Spade. They pretty much are co-billed, I think, as the leads in this one. So this was your idea as a pairing. Anything else you want to add to that?
SNL.
Yep.
1995.
Yes.
First kind of leading roles for each male lead.
I said all that.
Yeah. I guess that about covers it. It just seems natural to kind of smash together these two well-loved mid-90s comedies that in the ensuing years have pretty much become iconic.
Mm-hmm.
But today we're going to find out which of the two is just that much more memorable.
That's right. So these are today's combatants for the episode. I did steal Claude's thunder on the reasons why they were chosen, but it is what it is. In a moment, Claude's going to move aside, and I'm going to be back with the basics. All right, I'm back, as I said I would be, with the basics. We will start with Billy Madison, again from 1995. Directing, we have Tamra Davis. She's known mostly for CB4, Half-Baked, lots of TV. I mean, she's done episodes of My Name is Earl. She's done episodes of Ugly Betty, and a lot of episodes of Grey's Anatomy as well. This movie is written, no surprise here, by Adam Sandler and Tim Herlihy. This writing team has been together for a long time, and they are known mostly for all the Adam Sandler movies, essentially. Doing the music for this one, we have Randy Edelman. He is known for Twins. He is known for Ghostbusters 2. He is known for Kindergarten Cop, Drop Dead Fred, My Cousin Vinny, The Mask, dozens more. This dude is a busy guy in Hollywood doing musical scores and soundtracks. All right, getting to the cast, of course, as Billy Madison, we have Adam Sandler. He's known for this movie. He's known for Happy Gilmore, The Waterboy, Little Nicky, that is, etc., etc. Must we go on? We all know who Adam Sandler is. Playing Billy's father, Brian Madison, we have Darren McGavin. McGavin is known for a couple things. This movie, Airport 77, and of course, A Christmas Story, as well as Kolchak the Night Stalker and Murphy Brown on television. Playing Veronica Vaughn, we have Bridget Wilson. Wilson is known mostly for a lot of action movies, things like Last Action Hero, Mortal Kombat, as well as I Know What You Did Last Summer. As the sleazy executive Eric Gordon, we have Bradley Whitford. Whitford, of course, is known for Adventures in Babysitting, more recent movies like The Cabin in the Woods, Get Out, and TV, especially The West Wing, as well as episodes of a ton of other shows over time. Playing Principal Max Anderson, we have Joshua Mostel or Mostel. He's known for Sophie's Choice, City Slickers, and Big Daddy. And then finally, as the loser friend Frank, we have Norm Macdonald, who is, of course, is known for SNL. He starred in Dirty Work and Screwed, and on TV he had The Norm Show, which was later just called Norm. All right, you can also watch in the tertiary cast, you can watch for Jim Downey, Robert Smigel, Steve Buscemi, and Chris Farley, all in roles that verge on small roles to cameos. All right, this film was actually not Sandler's first film. He had appeared in larger roles in things like Going Overboard and Airheads, as well as a smaller role in the Coneheads movie. This was, however, his first time writing a film and carrying it as the lead actor. Several actors were considered for roles in the movie, such as the Sandler regular Alan Cover, as well as Bob Odenkirk and Philip Seymour Hoffman. Hoffman actually auditioned, but then he later turned it down. So, with the writing done and the casting done and a studio budget, the film went into production in June of 1994 and was done with principal photography by August of the same year. So, it didn't take very long to film it. Usually doesn't for a comedy of this type. Okay, so moving on to pop culture footprint. Pretty decent, obviously. The film did not get good reviews, but it became popular amongst a certain group of people who were just the right age and just the right temperament at just the right time. And it wasn't typical for a film like this to generate much in the way of cross-media content or merchandise. At the time, it wasn't common, and it's no different in the case for this movie. There have been several re-releases on VHS, DVD, and Blu-ray. It's pretty easy now to find merchandise, shirts, toys, other things that reference the movie. So, did pretty well for itself and continues to.
This is Adam Sandler. I'm on the set of Billy Madison, a new movie. And E.T., I want you to follow me. Come on!
Oh, passing third grade, the Billy Madison way.
It's not like the most serious of sets. We're just goofing around and we're happy that we're getting to make a funny movie and that's it. I just always thought it would be fun to get to do it again in school, you know, because when you're older, you're always like, man, if I would do it over again, I'd do this and that. And so I always thought it'd be fun to get to do a movie, get to relive first through 12th grade again and try to do it the right way.
Today's not a good day on this day. I got a bruise. I was playing tetherball with that kid and he hurt me.
Hey, Adam, you want me to go take care of that kid for you?
The kid didn't mean to do it, but he needs to be punished. I don't want you to hurt him bad. Just make sure he knows not to do it again.
All right.
And he's over there, he's bragging to his friends right now, but he's going to pay for this.
Moving on, again, 1995, we have Tommy Boy. This time, as director, we have Peter Siegel. He is known for My Fellow Americans, Naked Gun 33 and a Third, Anger Management, and 50 First Dates, which of course is a Sandler movie. This film was written by Bonnie and Terry Turner. They are a longtime husband and wife writing team. They are known for working on SNL. They also wrote Coneheads, Wayne's World 1 and 2, and the underrated Brady Bunch movie. Moving on to music for Tommy Boy, we have David Newman. Just like Randy Edelman from Billy Madison, Newman has been extremely busy in Hollywood doing movie scores and soundtracks. He's been doing it for a long time. He is known for The Brave Little Toaster. He did Heathers. He did Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure and Bogus Journey. And he also did Little Monsters. He did The Phantom. And again, his credit includes dozens more beyond the ones that I mentioned. All right, the cast. As Tommy Callahan, we have Chris Farley. He, of course, is known for SNL, Black Sheep, Beverly Hills Ninja, and Almost Heroes. He also did smaller roles and appearances in many of his SNL peers movies, such as Billy Madison. Starring as uptight numbers guy Richard Hayden is David Spade. He is also known for SNL, of course, and Black Sheep. He also did Joe Dirt, Dickie Roberts, Grown Ups. And again, he's done a lot of sort of like supporting roles in a lot of his peers' films. And he's had TV shows and talk shows and whatnot. Tommy's would-be stepmother, Beverly, is played by Bo Derek. She's known for Bolero, Ghost Can't Do It, and of course, she's known for the movie 10. Playing love interest Michelle Brock, we have Julie Warner. She's known for Doc Hollywood, The Puppet Master, and on TV, she appeared in Family Law and a few episodes of Nip Tuck. All right, playing auto parts tycoon Ray Zielinski, we have Dan Aykroyd. Everybody knows who Dan Aykroyd is. Ghostbusters, Blues Brothers, Dragnet, Coneheads, lots more, and of course, another SNL alum. Playing Big Tom Callahan is Brian Dennehy. Dennehy is known for First Blood, Cocoon, and Presumed Innocent. And then playing Beverly's sleazy son, Paul, is Rob Lowe. Rob Lowe is known for appearing in St. Elmo's Fire, Wayne's World, Austin Powers' International Man of Mystery, and he's become well known recently for his role in the TV show Parks and Rec. All right, so Tommy Boy was filmed concurrently with a season of SNL. So actors Farley and Spade, who were active cast members at the time, were constantly flying back and forth between various areas of Ontario and New York City for SNL. This led to some stress, some spats between Spade and Farley, some of them stirring from Farley thinking that Spade was spending too much time with Lowe, so he was a little bit jealous. Speaking of Lowe, he actually went uncredited in this role. He did it as a favor to Farley because he was contractually connected to filming Stephen King's The Stand, which was a TV miniseries. And but he could appear in this as long as he was uncredited, so it was a loophole. However, just in case other actors, including Matthew McConaughey, were auditioned for the role of Paul, again, just in case Rob Lowe was, for some reason, unable to commit to the role. All right, Pop culture footprint for Tommy Boy. Again, this one had mixed reviews, but it was another nominal success financially, as you'll see in a minute. Enough so that Farley and Spade were paired again together in another film, Black Sheep. Once again, comedies of this era and of this type didn't typically produce merchandise of any kind, but due to its popularity with folks, again, of a certain age and a certain temperament at the right time, it has maintained a presence. It's gotten VHS, DVD, and Blu-ray releases, and nowadays you can find plenty of merchandise for the movie. All right, so that's it for the basics. In just a minute, I'm going to leave, and Claude's going to sit right here for the tale of the tape.
Greetings, fight fans and movie buffs. Welcome to the tale of the tape for tonight's main event of the evening, Billy Madison versus Tommy Boy. Now let's see how these comedic co-workers stack up against each other. Starting out, as we always do, with the distributing studios. Billy Madison somehow made a deal with a titan of Hollywood industry, Universal Pictures. And Tommy Boy was put out by Paramount, as apparently every SNL-related movie has always been. Now, as far as ratings go, these competitors are dead even. These are both PG-13 movies. And if, like us, you were teenagers at the time these movies came out, they hit you right in the sweet spot. And the rating kind of reflects that. As far as running time goes, just like in real life, Tommy Boy outweighs Billy Madison, because Billy Madison comes in just under the 90-minute mark at 89 minutes. Tommy Boy, however, comes in nearly 10 minutes longer at 97 minutes. Some would say 8 minutes. Why didn't I? Because you always have to overbill your fighting weight. Taking a look at the budget now, Billy Madison is outweighed here as well. This movie was made for $10 million. A pretty scant amount even by mid-90s comedy standards. Tommy Boy had twice as much to work with at $20 million. Now, what did they do at the box office with those budgets? Well, Billy Madison made a little over double its money, $26.4 million. Tommy Boy brought in $32.7. Modest profits in both cases. Billy Madison probably takes the edge just because the budget initially was so much lower. However, overall, this story is pretty evenly matched from head to toe. Let's see if that continues next as the battle begins. Let's open the doors and settle some scores.
All right, we are both back at the table now, and it's time to talk about some scores. We are going to start with round one, which is visuals. First up is Billy Madison, and first up is also me. I'm giving Billy Madison a score of 6.5 for visuals. It's above the good line. We always talk about 6 is good. The visuals they're colorful, they're fun, they are composed and framed in interesting ways. There's even a little bit of I guess I would say, whimsical nature to some of the visuals in Billy Madison. They're not too zany. We're not talking about Ernest or a Mel Brooks movie, but they're interesting and they're fun for this movie. So I arrive at 6.5.
Well, I'm going to go a half a point better and give the visuals for Billy Madison a 7. Pretty much for all the same reasons. It's a great looking movie full of fun locations and set dressings and visual gags even. There's no real effects to speak of here, which is typically pretty important in the visual category. But, you know, the physical locations and the way they make use of them kind of make up for that. I would say I agree that it's kind of hyper real.
Yeah.
And I guess the way that I made sense of that in my brain is that it's kind of all through the lens of this rich kid.
Sure. Yeah.
Who up till now hasn't, life has looked like this probably for him.
Right. That's a good point.
The nice thing that they do is they keep kind of giving you his POV. particularly when he starts seeing invisible penguins, which is a recurring visual gag.
Yes.
That's, I mean, just infamous at this point. Yeah, it's a really pleasing movie to look at, and I mean, I could list off individual elements that make that so, but I will suffice to say, for me, that's why it gets a 7.
All right, so next up is a set of visual scores for, this time, Tommy Boy, of course. I'm actually going a half a point lower for Tommy Boy than I did for Billy Madison. I'm going down to a 6. It lacks most of the things that we just talked about. Again, 6 is good. Tommy Boy is very competently shot. It's competently framed. There are a few clever gags here and there. But for the most part, it tends to be a little bit less interesting. It tends to be a little bit duller. Part of that is due to the nature of the story itself. You know, you're talking about Tommy coming from a small blue-collar town. You're talking about the fact that his father owns an auto parts manufacturing, a factory.
Not a glamorous setting.
And no, not exactly. And there's the fact that this movie takes place more in real locations.
Right.
They are they are shooting in sort of warehouse settings, and they are shooting on the streets of Chicago and places like this. So
yeah.
I think part of the maybe slight dullness of the visuals is due to the fact that they're choosing these places to shoot in. So it's a purposeful thing that the movie's doing. It's not a mistake. It's not accidental, but it does bring it down to that level of just sort of competency.
Yeah.
Especially when contrasted against a movie like Billy Madison that, again, like I said, has a little bit more whimsy to its nature. So again, not a bad score, just not spectacular. I'm giving it a 6.
I'm also going to go down half a point to 6.5, which I guess just keeps it just that much above where you're at. All the same reasons, really. It looks fine. Again, there's no real visual effects to speak of in this movie.
There's a deer puppet.
Yeah. You get your animatronic moment. You get the locations are less fun. It also seems like it was shot at a very gloomy time of year. Everything's kind of always overcast.
Yeah.
Even when they're outside.
The trees are very unleafy. They're not.
They're dying. Even when they're in the water, it's still kind of just gray skies.
Yep. Yeah, it's very
true.
true.
Like it's going to open up on them at any minute.
Yes.
So there is that to consider. But again, that sort of lends itself more to the lived-in, realistic feel of the setting. So, it gets less marks visually for me for that, but it makes sense with, combined with the story. I think the cinematography is fine, but I will give special marks to the DP for a really cool transition, spoilers, from the wedding reception scene after Big Tom collapses. They all kind of hover over him and go in tight, and then they stand up and it's transitioned and they're at the funeral. Thought that was a really cool way to move from one scene to the next.
Yeah, with no cut.
Yeah. And also, I think that in terms of cinematography, the angles and everything, when Chris Farley is in the airplane bathroom.
Yes, that's very fun.
It was not a lot at all to work with in terms of real estate and camera placement, but I think they did it very well, as good as it could have possibly been done. So those two moments stand out for me in terms of cinematography. So while initially it seemed to me that it was going to get a significantly lower score than Billy Madison, I think the camera work kind of elevates it to just below it at 6.5.
Sure.
Well, I suppose it's time to talk about performances and move on to round 2. Billy Madison is going to throw the first punch here, and I'm going to give it a score of 8. For me, it is very clear that Sandler is relying on his SNL bag of tricks. And not just SNL, but also at the time, his very successful solo comedy CD bag of tricks. They're kind of hand in hand a little bit. a lot of verbal tics, a lot of gibberish talk, and just the hallmarks of Adam Sandler's earlier career are all here. For me, they do a good job of incorporating it into his character. On the surface, it doesn't make a lot of sense that he just randomly turns into this bizarre, seemingly mentally impaired individual. But they weave it into the story in a way that it's almost just as funny when he does these things to watch the reactions of the other people in the scene and the other characters. Also, I feel like the direction in this movie is perfect for, I guess, like the cast as a whole, the comedic beats. It's not, I think in comedy you tend to have mostly fast pacing, kind of get from one joke to the next, let's keep it going, let's keep that energy up. But this, it gives moments time to breathe. It gives things time to play out. They linger on certain scenes where doing so adds to the humor. They say Billy in the bath with a shampoo and conditioner fighting each other. They just stay on that for a little bit longer and kind of let his dumb facial expression simmer a little bit. The scene where Chris Farley is trying to help him study and takes off his shirt, and that's correct, and they just kind of hold on to him. There's moments throughout the movie like that where if they had kind of cut a little sooner, you're not wringing out that last little drop of comedy. And I think this movie does that really well. So it lets each performance shine a little bit better than maybe they would have with a different director. As far as the supporting talent in the movie, I think it's really strong. For me, the comedy is pretty evenly distributed. Obviously, Adam Sandler's a star. It's a vehicle for him. But, I mean, most of the cast gets more than one occasion to really have not only a time to shine, but also, I mean, just about everybody gets at least one line of dialogue that is so quotable, even, nearly 30 years later. And I just feel like that kind of makes it stand out a little bit for me. So, for those reasons, the performances of Billy Madison get an 8 from me.
All right, time for me to give my performance a score. We have a pretty wide gulf here, one of our wider ones. I'm going all the way down to 5.5 for performances in Billy Madison. What I find this movie to be is too Sandler-y. I have a hard time sort of stomaching a lot of that sort of thing. Like you said, he's digging into a bag of tricks from his SNL days and from his comedy albums. He's doing a lot of the who's-a-boo type stuff. And I just find it to be a little bit untenable for a film character. I know that there are moments where he's not doing that as a character, but I feel that he's too reliant on it in this movie. It's too much of that to carry an entire film. The high points, of course, Chris Farley, he kind of steals the show as the bus driver. Steals his scenes. I shouldn't say he steals the show, but he's Chris Farley. He has those moments. And then actually, the guy that I think kind of runs away with most of the scenes that he's in a bigger role than Farley, obviously, is Bradley Whitford. He just has that way of being just sort of like perturbed and confused by what's happening, and by what the people around him are doing, especially the Sandler character, Billy Madison. So those are high points for me. I think a lot of the other sort of supporting roles are a little bit stereotypical. I love Darren McGavin. I think he's just kind of playing sort of a very typical sort of like rich, not quite understanding type of a father character. I think the Veronica Vaughn character is also just kind of a little bit of a standardized archetype. And of course, we both love Norm Macdonald. I don't think he's like super well utilized in his role. I mean, maybe either the writers or the way the movie was cut or edited, or maybe he himself wasn't comfortable sort of like stepping fully into a complete role either. And it's not that Norm Macdonald is a spectacular actor, even in the things that were vehicles for him. but I don't think that this movie quite captures what it is about Norm that makes Norm Norm. So I don't know. I just come away feeling a little bit like there's a couple of high spots. There's a lot of competency, but I think there's just too much Sandleriness in the performances. So we disagree.
Tommy Boy, and I'm gonna go just slightly below Billy Madison again and give it a 7.5. For me, Tommy Boy is slightly harder to judge than Billy Madison. I feel like the strength of the performances is more concentrated in certain moments and certain characters in Tommy Boy, and for me, it was more evenly dispersed in Billy Madison. I feel like the comedy style is much more cartoony overall in Tommy Boy. You have more, and maybe that's just a side effect of Chris Farley being who he is, just being so like boisterous and percussive in his movements, and explosive. Can't just fall on the table; the whole thing has to shatter.
That's right.
And all that stuff. But even David Spade is.
God damn it.
Kind of a cartoon character in his own way at times in this movie. I feel like Chris Farley really is captured lightning in this role, and David Spade is the perfect straight man. Obviously, the formula and that pairing worked well together, as it would be. It worked well on SNL, and they would make another movie, kind of the same exact structure in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So, a little double dipping never hurt Hollywood, I suppose, if it works once. Brian Dennehy also is great as Big Tom, even though his time on screen is ultimately pretty limited.
Mm-hmm.
I think we kind of remarked on that when we were watching it, that it's easy to forget just how little of the movie he's really in.
Yeah.
As far as the extended cast, other than David Spade, Chris Farley, and Brian Dennehy, I feel like most of them are kind of by the book. I guess I feel about them the way you kind of felt about Bridget Wilson and Billy Madison. They're just sort of playing the characters that you'd expect would populate this world, and just doing it pretty much the way you've seen it done. I feel like Rob Lowe is, maybe because it's Rob Lowe, but he's essentially playing the same character as he did 3 years earlier in Wayne's World.
Right.
From a different angle. Maybe it's where the Wayne's World guy ended up.
Yeah, right.
Kind of had to go out of town and find a new angle to hatch a scheme, but it feels very samey, the notes, the style. I mean, it's the same actor. Even Dan Aykroyd's basically extended cameo, it's enjoyable, but it feels, a little phoned in. It's a voice I feel like I've heard him use a bunch. It's that same robotic deadpan delivery, which is why you love Dan Aykroyd. But it didn't bowl me over here. So, again, 7.5 is nothing to sneeze at. So those are my nitpicks that keep it from anything higher. But that's why I gave it what I gave it.
All right, so I'm going a little bit higher than you, but we're not that far away, really. I'm going to an 8 for performances in Tommy Boy. So our thoughts are not that, or at least our scores are not that different here. They were much more different in Billy Madison, obviously. I'm going 8, like I said. Obviously, this film is carried heavily by Chris Farley. So he leads the way. He might be one of the funniest human beings ever by instinct. But I think one of the strengths of this movie is that he's doing a lot of emotional lifting here. He does do all the things you say he does. The explosive physical comedy and loud physical comedy, or loud vocal comedy, I guess. But I think he's also doing some emotional lifting. He's playing the son of Big Tom Callahan. There's scenes where he is upset, disappointed. confused, feeling lost, feeling, like a failure, etc., etc. Now, these moments are always bookended by the big comedy moments, of course. But I mean, I do think he's carrying there's more of a real character in there, despite those outlandish moments. Now, I do like some of the performances that you're mentioning. I don't disagree across the board. I mean, like you said, Lowe is playing just sort of an archetype kind of sleaze.
Yeah.
Not sort of an executive sleaze like he plays in Wayne's World. He's playing, the con man type here, which is not that different.
The Rob Lowe slime ball.
yes. It's not that. I mean, you're right. Brian Dennehy is great in that part, but you do, again, and you said it, we both realized, like, wow, by the time you get even an hour into the movie, like, those Dennehy moments seem so far in the past. It feels like a different movie almost. But he's good while he's there, and it gets the point. He and Farley also do a good job of connecting their characters together.
Right.
I like Aykroyd in that role. He is doing a very Aykroyd-y thing. He's doing the sort of well-enunciated, quickly delivered lines. It's very Elwood Blues. It's very... it also reminds me a lot of the character from whose name escapes me from The Great Outdoors. Mm-hmm. Especially when he gives his speech about what he sees when he looks across the wilderness, and he sees industry and development, et cetera, et cetera.
Roman Craig.
Yes, thank you very much. So he reminds me very much of that character. He and Ray Zielinski would definitely, go to the same clubs.
Oh, for sure.
When they're going to get a bite to eat. But I like that performance. So it might be a little bit derivative of something he had already done. It might be something that we have seen from Aykroyd before, but I like it just the same. I'm not going to say too much about Bo Derek. I mean, she's Bo Derek, and I don't want to be too negative. She serves her character's purpose.
I mean, according to your score, she's an 8 in this movie. Well,
yeah, so it's downgrade. But also, you have David Spade. And so you have the Farley-Spade chemistry. And like you said, that worked well. So well that they decided to team them back up again. For some reason, not as a sequel.
Yeah.
But I mean, Black Sheep just could have been Tommy Boy too. But I mean, Toomey Boy? I don't know.
I always thought it was when it came out for a long time.
I mean, it could have been. The characters were almost exactly the same.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, that movie got made because that chemistry was appreciated and recognized. And now David Spade gets to tell Chris Farley stories for the rest of his natural life. So.
Yeah, that's true.
But anyway, I like the performances. I think Farley is doing some heavy lifting, both in terms of the comedy and in terms of the emotion, and that really gives it the strongest boost. But I pretty much like where things are going here across the board, and that's how I arrive at an 8 for performances in Tommy Boy. All right, time for round 3. This time I go first, and this time we're talking about writing, and we're going back to Billy Madison. I'm giving Billy Madison a 6 for writing. Again, it's good. The premise is nonsense, of course, and I think that it's a little too dependent on one of the things that I find a weakness for this film. I think the concept of this film, the character as written, the story as written, the narrative as written, is dependent on Sandler's gimmicks. And I think it was written with that in mind. So...
Absolutely.
So because I find the Sandleriness of this movie to be a little bit much, I find the writing to be a little bit underwhelming because it is steered so heavily in support of those gimmicks. So I think it hurts my writing score overall. Some of the... There are good moments. There are things to be remembered. Jim Downey's delivery of everyone here is stupider for having heard it after they kind of montage through Sandler's statement, or I should say Madison's statement when they're doing the big sort of quiz bowl to determine if he... It's a nonsense premise. That's what I said it was before. But, Jim Downey's delivery of that has become sort of like a meme in the modern day. Like everybody uses it, at least my friend group does. We use it a lot. So, I mean, there are those memorable moments. But I just find that the jokes tend to be uneven. I find that you have these cartoony, outlandish Sandler moments mixed in with sort of the kid humor when he's in like kindergarten. And it's a tough mix for me. I have some difficulty with it. It's not my favorite. Again, I don't want to be too negative. I did give it a 6, which is considered good. So I arrive at a 6 for writing for Billy Madison. What do you got?
I'm going to give this, the writing for Billy Madison, a 7.5. I agree with a lot of your points, but see them as positives in many cases. That era of Adam Sandler's comedy, it fits the idea of being placed among children so well. I mean, it's below juvenile. So going back to elementary school is the perfect setting, which to me always seemed kind of part of, at least, why they came up with the idea of sending him back to school, because I might agree with you a little more if the entire movie was him in the adult world doing that stuff.
Okay. Fair enough.
To me, the concept of the story, I would say it's clever, from the sense that it's not something at the time I think that existed a lot. It gets a little bit of marks for originality. The way they handled it through, I guess, wish fulfillment, in a way that the average person watching this could find appealing from 2 aspects. Everybody, since time began, the common man has been fascinated with the lives of the rich. I mean, his Lifestyles of Rich and Famous was on for a decade for a reason.
MTV Cribs.
Exactly. Hit my ride, all of it. So seeing that perspective is entertaining on one level. And then who doesn't want to go back to school and redo some of the things that they did? You know, who's never thought about going back and kind of approaching it different this time?
Sure.
So I think it's a pretty universally appealing story concept. As far as dialogue goes, I mean, this movie, maybe more than any other movie we've talked about on the show, maybe, is just overflowing with quotes. It's maybe the most, maybe top 3 most quotable movies I've ever seen in my life. All right, you want me to do the list? What day is it? I don't know, October? Jack Nicholson now or 1974? It's poop again. I mean, we can go on and on. No yelling on the bus. One of my favorite underrated ones is, sorry it doesn't put the delicious Triscuit crackers in my stomach now, does it? I use that all the time in real life. For all those reasons, and for making me ponder the question, who would steal 30 bag lunches? I give the writing in Billy Madison a 7.5.
All right, so we are going to move over to Tommy Boy now. I am giving the writing for Tommy Boy a 7.5. So similar scoring to what you're giving Billy Madison. I find the writing in Tommy Boy to be a good balance, because as running parallel to Chris Farley's responsibilities in this movie of handling the comedy and handling sort of the pathos of the story, you know, the death of the father, et cetera, et cetera. I think the writing does a good job of handling all that. And also I tend to think that this movie kind of has a pace that it escalates, but in a way that I find pleasing. You know, the gags start off as Tommy accidentally spilling his M&Ms into the vent of David Spade's character's car.
Right.
And by the end of the movie, they've got, you know, the car is a ramshackle of blue tarp and duct tape and
Baby gate?
a baby gate door and, baling twine, and it's been ripped up by a supposedly dead deer. And then he ends up pretending to have a bomb strapped to his chest by the end of it. Like, I find that there's a very sort of comical, which it ought to be since this is meant to be a comedy, sort of escalation of events. Also, this movie is a buddy comedy and it's a road trip movie.
Yep.
And then you have, like I said, the other elements of the character growth and development and emotional relationships between characters. There is also like sort of a wholesome love story that's like it's played very sweet, and it doesn't go in any sort of like aggressive direction, which for the time would not have been an uncommon thing. So I think they kind of handle that in a fun, classy way. I don't know. I just find this movie to be incredibly funny. I think the writing works. I think the writing matches Farley's ability to perform comedy in a perfect way. Tommy Boy is probably we worked it out earlier, it might not be in my top 5 comedies of all time. It's probably in my top 10. But I find the writing to match what Chris Farley is trying to do. There are little spikes of nonsense, which sometimes I talk about things not meshing well, but in this movie, I appreciate them. I find them to be sometimes a little bit of a relief from, a lot of the string of comedy in this film is following this very, otherwise, a storyline that could be treated very seriously, which is him trying to sell the brake pads and save the company to save the town. So even though that the movie is funny following that line, sometimes it'll give you a little spike of something different. So the one that pops to mind is when they're in Zelensky's testing floor for vehicles and engines and whatnot. They turn on the motor, and David Spade's hair flips back because it's a hairpiece. Little moments like that I find to be a welcome surprise. There's earlier I talked about how the movie doesn't have much whimsy in it, but there's another moment where David Spade's character, they've pretended to be flight attendants, and they've got to change back into their normal clothes. So David Spade steps into the bathroom, closes the door, opens it, steps right back out, having changed in about 5 seconds. And Chris Farley's character just doesn't say anything, just observes that reality.
Right.
And so I like those little touches of nonsense, because a lot of the movie's storyline is not nonsense. It's hard for me to explain what it is about the mixture here that I like. That's where I arrive in order to come to a 7.5 for the writing of Tommy Boy.
I'm not going to go much lower. 7.
Mm-hmm.
It is a buddy comedy and a road trip movie. And because of those aspects, that's the bulk of the construction, the skeleton, if you will, of the story. Because of those elements, it goes down to a 7. It feels a little more tropey to me and a little more cookie cutter than Billy Madison, which struck me as though, the versions of that have existed. I feel like the combination was more original in the presentation. Tommy Boy just seems like it's doing something. It's doing multiple things that are recognizable, that are tried and true. It lowers the writing a little bit compared to Billy Madison for me, but again, certainly a 7 is no shameful score.
No.
Though it feels more tropey to me, it's elevated by the talent involved. So I think that brings it back up to the realm of 7. It's nearly equally loaded with quotes as Billy Madison in terms of dialogue. This is a very quotable, very memeable now movie.
Yes.
Plenty to rattle off to impress your friends and coworkers here.
Of a certain age.
And surely to encourage those who are not of that age to get with the program a little bit here.
Absolutely. That's true.
So I stay at 7 for the writing for Tommy Boy.
Fair enough.
As far as Billy Madison's audio is concerned, I give that a 7 as well. Even though now, in 2023, I really don't want to hear classic rock anymore in my personal life. You get to a point where those same 50 to 70 songs you've heard for the last 30 years are just, you're good. Some of them are in here, but the choices are interesting enough still that I can do it in the context of the movie. And at the time, they were pretty unique pop music choices for this movie. we would all come to see that a lot of these artists are personal Sandler favorites, but they work really well in the context of the story of when Billy Madison grew up and originally went to high school and the music he would have been listening to. So they fit with that. Plus, some of them are, just plain kick-ass, or at least the moments that they use in the movie.
Sure.
This movie was the first time I ever heard the song Renegade by Styx. So for a while, I was a pretty big fan of that song. In terms of the score, the main theme for this movie is an earworm for me. It's very memorable. It's almost relentlessly memorable. If such a thing exists. It kind of works its way into your psyche against your will. And, it's to the point where all I have to hear is the name Billy Madison, and it just loads in my brain. It's not particularly an interesting score, but for some reason, just that melody just sticks in there.
Uh-huh.
It's very competent, it's very well done, and it works well in the context of the subject matter and the settings. So for all those reasons, again, my audio score for Billy Madison is a 7.
So I go down quite a bit for my score. I go all the way down to 5.5. Again, that's not bad. It's not good either. It's somewhere around competent. It's funny that you said that the scores, you made me rethink a comment I was going to make, which is I was going to say that the score was unmemorable. But I think you kind of nailed something there where it's not that it's unmemorable, it's just that it's not really notable.
It's almost generic.
Yeah, it's generic, but it does kind of sneak its way in there. So I think maybe that's a better way of describing it. So I don't disagree with that. And also, I actually have positive things to say about some of the other elements. First of all, there's a musical number in this film.
Yes.
So that's the kind of nonsense I actually appreciate in the middle of, it's complete, I want to say middle of nowhere. It's out of nowhere, I guess.
Yeah.
So that's kind of an interesting, I don't know that that's really, you have to have music for a musical number. I don't know that that's really part of the audio because you have the visual element of a musical score or a musical number. But anyway, I thought it was worth mentioning. Also, and as you said, classic rock, we're over it at this point. But, I think that it was a little bit more unique because you could have gone the arena rockers of the day.
Right.
But instead they went with the Cars, which I thought was kind of the Cars are always welcome to me. So I started this by telling you that the audio I was giving Billy Madison was a 5.5. But your comments and me building upon them has caused me to call an audible.
Uh-oh.
And I'm going to boost it up a point.
I think this is a show first.
This is a show first. I'm going 6.5 for the audio for Billy Madison. Yeah, because I think that there's a little bit more to it that maybe I wasn't appreciating. So, congratulations. So 6.5, 6.5 for Billy Madison scores. All right. Back to you. Because we're going to Tommy Boy now.
Time for more Tommy Boy. Tommy Boy's audio.
Timey Boy.
Did I say Tommy?
Time for more Timey Boy.
Oh,
No, I don't think you said it.
No. I forgot. Yeah, we should have. Next time we'll do all of our title-related puns on camera. And the context will make sense to you and us. For now, though, the audio score that I give to Timey Boy is a 6.5. Again, just below Billy Madison.
Mm-hmm.
You're sensing a theme, perhaps, that the movies are basically neck and neck for me, with, kind of more sentimentally attached to one of them. Will it be obvious which one it is? I feel like the score in Tommy Boy is just that much more derivative, that much less memorable. I don't get any piece of it that sticks in there like Billy Madison does. In fact, if there was literally a gun to my head right now, I could not hum any piece of this score. I would not save the town. In fact, what stands out to me about the score is that it's almost TV movie like in parts. I don't know. I just kind of got that feeling at certain times while watching Tommy Boy again for this episode of the show. And even though I have a modern day aversion to classic rock and appreciate kind of the alternative choices that were made in Billy Madison, I still like it better than the Tommy Boy soundtrack. The pop songs in this movie are much more contemporary to the time, much more 90s alternative flavored, with a few exceptions. And I just don't think that they age as well or are memorable in any way. I don't know that any of them are really famous 90s alternative songs. You can, as soon as you hear them, you go, I know exactly when that came out.
Yeah.
So I guess it sounds like I'm probably harsher than a 6.5, but I think it gets 6.5 because it still fits everything that's visually presented on screen. It's still, like, the score still underscores the emotional moments in the movie, the comedy in the movie. The soundtrack songs still work in the context of those scenes. They just, they aren't as impactful as they could have been. So, 6.5.
All right, so time for me to give my audio score for Tommy Boy, and I'm actually going below your score, that is, by a full point. I'm going to 5.5. My original scoring had these two films tied in terms of their audio scoring. And I'm maintaining my 5.5 for Tommy Boy for a lot of the reasons that you said. I find the soundtrack to be forgettable.
Yeah.
And I find the score to be forgettable, but competent but forgettable. But it also leaves me with a sense of this. It's funny because I almost find, even though this movie tends to be visually and purposefully a little bit duller than Billy Madison,
Yeah.
I find the score to be strangely more whimsical. And I think of the visuals of Billy Madison to be more visual. I think of the score for Tommy Boy to be this sort of bouncing thing. And you describe it as like sort of TV movie quality. And I can see that. I guess it sticks out the most for me at the end of the movie. Because the movie ends with sort of a real conversation and a real emotional moment between Tommy and his maybe girlfriend by this point in the movie.
Right.
Not sure yet. And they're talking about, Big Tom being gone and young Tom, what he's going to be doing, what the plan is. And they're out on this little sailboat,
Yeah.
And this is not the scene where the kids pick on him from the shore. This is right at the end of the movie. And the camera pans out and they're still on the lake and it's like still sort of like a fall day or whatever it is. Because like you said, everything seems to be dead and dreary. But then this music plays and it's this bouncy little tune. Even though the movie, for a comedy movie, dares to end on kind of a somber note. And it's just that moment is kind of like displays that like they wanted this whimsical soundtrack, but they were a little bit more ambitious when they wrote the movie. But because the storyline kind of is centered on this like somewhat serious narrative, the score I think would have done well to sort of like find that balance similar to the way the movie does in general. And I don't think it quite does. So I think about it as it doesn't quite match what I'm watching.
Agreed.
So that's how I arrive at an audio score of 5.5 for Tommy Boy. All right, that's 4 rounds of scoring. We got to do some math. We're going to be back with a winner. All right, we're back. As I said we would be. We did some calculations and we have some final scores. Slightly surprising result here. Kind of a fun result. You'll see what I mean in just a moment. First, we'll bring down the score for Billy Madison. And Billy Madison gets a 6.78. And now the score for Tommy Boy, getting the win with a score of 6.81. That is probably, and I think actually definitely, the closest set of scores we've had on the show. Tommy Boy only getting the 1 because we round to the hundredths. If we only rounded to the tenths, then you'd have a tie here because these both round to 6.8. An interesting result, kind of a fun result. Any sort of first initial reactions to that?
I was surprised when it shook out that way, but ultimately not because, these are just from the beginning of the idea of matching these two up. they're just so evenly matched across the board. I mean, right down from the conception of each project, when they came out. I mean, look at the tail of the tape. It's pretty much neck and neck all the way through. Obviously, some of our scores didn't match up as much. But when you look at the comparison and the battle as a whole, these are shockingly even with each other.
I mean, that's why we score across multiple categories, because things do factor in differently. Now, I will say that, we often talk about our instincts and feelings about a movie as being, as much as possible, a separate issue from being what we score it. We try to be as objective as possible when we score. It's not possible to be 100% objective. Otherwise, we wouldn't have different scores.
Right.
But that's the goal, is to try to come at it in an analytical way. Now, my instincts about these movies is that I like Tommy Boy a lot. And I don't like Billy Madison very much, to be perfectly honest. I think that was probably made clear in some of my comments during the scoring rounds. Like I said, Tommy Boy is probably in my top 10 comedies of all time. I will watch it again many times. Billy Madison, for me, does not rank that highly. Again, these are just personal opinions. And I probably won't ever watch it again from this point. I would be surprised if it happens. It'll happen on accident if it does. So again, just an interesting comparison, an interesting observation about what happens when we try to, as we do on this show, separate what our feelings, thoughts, and instincts about a movie are to what happens when we try to break it down into scoring and numbers.
It's true. You could probably flip that coin and switch Billy Madison and Tommy Boy for me. I don't dislike Tommy Boy as much as you dislike Billy Madison, but
Sure.
I would certainly pick Billy Madison to watch again multiple times before I watch Tommy Boy again once. It just is what it is.
It is what it is. All right. So that was a fun result. I guess that'll do it for this episode of Nerd Bomber vs. Movies. You can find us right here on YouTube. Obviously, you already have. You can also find us on Instagram at NerdBomberPod. That's the best place to go to get various links to what we do, both on the show and in our own lives separately, I suppose. So, for your friend Claude, I've been Just Jamie, and until the next battle,
I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul.
We've been friends like 5 years. He's been friends with me 5 years. I've liked him for about 6 months. And the thing is that I know what he does better, and he knows what I do, so if it's not funny, I do it. If it's really funny, he does it.
This isn't a Saturday Night Live movie. Other than Dave and myself, it doesn't have anything to do with any characters or anything like that. This is kind of a new, fresh challenge that we took on. And
we're just screwing around. It's just two people we think, or they think, are funny together. And if it works, it works. But it's so hard to get a movie that's any good anyway, that if I can ride his coattails, I'll do it. Believe me, there's room. Later, Entertainment Tonight goes in Chris Farley's stomach to see what's cooking. Box of donuts in there. Help us! Because don't leave! He usually bangs his head and falls down the movie, and I just sit there and go, what are you doing?
I did a lot of falling in the movie too. I do a lot of falls all the time. That's what I like to do. I don't have much of the brain department, but when Fatty falls down, everyone goes home happy.
Thanks for coming, and hope you got the groove.
Because we're rocking out.